Welcome to Story Mantra, where books bridge cultures and break barriers. I'm your host, Anju Gattani. Please welcome my next guest. Hi, everyone. Welcome to Story Mantra, where I live and breathe books by the pages. I am an absolute story lover, and I'm your host, Anju Gattani. Today, we have the incredible international bestselling author, Lisa C. Lisa, welcome, welcome, welcome.
Thank you so much for having me. It's lovely to see you.
So I've heard Lisa talk on several occasions with, several books that she's had out. She's a phenomenal speaker, and her latest release is this incredible book, which I have worked very hard to coordinate with in my attire because that's how much I love the book. It's Daughters of the Sun and Moon by Lisa C. That's my autographed copy. So that's my little badge of honor from Lisa. Lisa, tell us about the story, the overview, and most interesting, the post-Civil War era that you're writing about in LA.
Right. So again, you just gave my little opening there. So it's Los Angeles, 1870. This is not what you might have imagined. This is a time period, that we've never seen in a movie or a TV show. Very few photographs even exist. It was this tiny little town of about 5,000 people, very dirty and dusty and extremely violent. And of those 5,000, there were 180 Chinese, and of that 180, there were 34 Chinese women. And so Daughters of the Sun and Moon was inspired by actually 4 real women who I have turned into 3 characters. And so in part, it's a story of friendship, of course, because I love women's friendship and keep coming back to it. But it's also what happens to them as they first arrive in this very violent town.
I know that, and I've read most of the book, and I'm at the end, but I don't want to finish the book because I'll hit the end, and then the story will be over. But it's mind-boggling in terms of the ambience you've created and the setting you've created. Now, I'm from Hong Kong. That's where I grew up for a large portion of my life. And so, you know the saying, you can take the girl out of Hong Kong, but you can't take Hong Kong out of the girl. So you've transitioned the story from, civilization and people, Chinese people who have lived in mainland China their entire lives and are migrating through Hong Kong into the territory of the United States. And the transition on the boat, it just reminded me of, immigrants again, back on the Mayflower and those era. How did you construct that and put that to life?
Yeah, I mean, it's actually, to me, a bit more like slavery. A lot of the ships that were bringing Chinese immigrants were former slave ships. And in the case of Chinese women, they were being brought here to be sold. And so, even though the Civil War is over and slavery's been outlawed, and it's in our Constitution, there was this one exception, and it had to do with the sale and ownership of Chinese women in the state of California. And so one of the women in the novel, Petal, is, sold by her family back in China and brought here against her will in the hold of a ship. Things are a little different up in the upper decks where Dove is traveling. But it is a story of immigration in the sense that they are 3 women coming from China, actually one from Hong Kong, and to me, that transition from Hong Kong, which in 1870 was a thriving port, very international already, had big buildings to this place. It's so backward. And it's a real shock to Moon to go from, we'll just call it civilization, to this really crazy little place.
That's the feeling I got because it felt like, LA at the era that you wrote it, and there were no rules, no regulations. It was just a free for all.
Yeah.
And it's very hard to picture that because, when you see what LA is today, obviously there's a huge contradiction. So you're like, wait, am I in the same place? Am I in the same city?
Well, that's one of the reasons why Moon is telling her part of the story from 1926 at the age of 82. And the very first time you see her, she says, I just need to tell you, this is not the place you think it is. No airplanes, no cars, no movies. I mean, all of the, which were there in 1926, by that time it's recognizable to us, that life would be very recognizable, but certainly not 1870. And so that's part of why she tells the story from, again, from age 82, that she has that perspective and she can keep reminding not just readers, but it was also me as I was writing this is not the place that you have in your head.
It was so different, I think, from your other works that you've done, in terms of you've got Petal and then you've got Dove, who are almost like on the same timeline or same thread, but on different ends of the spectrum.
Right.
They're completely, and then you do that so beautifully because they're on the same ship. Dove is on the upper deck, and then you've got Petal, who's on the lower berth. The same ship sailing to the same destination, but their journeys are so different.
Right. And so Dove is inspired by a real woman, like I said, 15 years old, who was brought here in an arranged marriage to a much, much older merchant who was described in the local press repeatedly as being hideously ugly. And she was reputed to be extremely beautiful, kind of romantic in her thoughts. And of course, there's something's going to happen to her. We're not going to give that part away. But everything that does happen to her happened to the real woman in real life. And then with Petal, she's inspired by two real women, again, sold by their families in China, brought here, sold into prostitution. The thing is that these two women in real life, from the moment they got here, they did everything they could to escape and find freedom. And so this is a spoiler. She's going to escape a few times, but every time she gets out, every detail that happens to her happened to those two women in real life. So every time she's, out and free, everything that happens to her happened to these real women.
So where does Petal get the courage from to do this? She's in an unknown land, foreign territory. And, I'm almost at the end of the book, like I said, so I'm seeing her journey, her arc. And what hits me is, where is all this courage coming from? Because Dove doesn't have it. Moon doesn't have it. She runs into danger versus running away from danger.
Exactly. And again, I think, I was inspired by these two real women who, again, every time they could, they escaped. And they kept getting caught and brought back, and it caused a lot of problems for them. But I do think that, this is America, the land of the free. That is so embedded in our culture, but it's also embedded in us as human beings, that we want to be free, that we don't want to be owned as property. And this is worldwide. People don't want to be owned and shouldn't be owned, right? And so we can't trace everybody who was ever enslaved to know exactly what they were thinking, but we do know that escaping and trying to find freedom is a story that happened worldwide, throughout history, as people sought freedom. Because that's what we as human beings want.
Right. Yeah.
And I guess that takes courage, but it also takes a kind of foolhardy belief too. It's courage, but it's also like, what are you thinking? You're not going to get away. They're going to bring you back. And yet people, again, throughout history have done that. And they have found that courage. I guess they're the ones who inspire the rest of us.
That's beautifully said. It's so true. And, a question that keeps occurring to me every time I read one of your books is how you bring the Asian culture to the Western reader. It's so difficult to do that. It truly is, because you're taking us, or any American reader or a British reader or whatever have you, to the place and time and era which they already have a vision of or an understanding of through secondhand media, which
Right.
is usually not true.
Right.
I
Yeah.
face that with the Indian culture as well. And so, you do it so beautifully that you bring the entire culture alive now, and you're doing it in a historical time period as well.
Yes. Well, part of it is I grew up in a very large Chinese American family. Obviously, I don't look very Chinese, but here in Los Angeles, when I was a kid, I had about 400 relatives here,
Wow.
about a dozen that looked like me, the majority still full Chinese, and then this spectrum in between. And so when I was a kid and I looked around me,
Mhm.
what I saw were Chinese faces. What I experienced was Chinese culture, Chinese tradition, Chinese language, Chinese food. And of course, that's why I write the kinds of books that I do. But there's also something else, and maybe you've experienced this with some of your writing,
Mhm.
which is there's a part in the books that I write that I'm actually trying to figure out where I fit in and how I fit in. I mean, obviously, I don't look Chinese, right? In my family, I'm accepted, but I also look different. And people can make certain assumptions about me based on how I look.
Mhm.
And so I am kind of on this, you could call it a tightrope, you could call it a wall, but it's something where I'm the one who's trying to figure out how I fit in. What do I know? What do I need to know? What am I not understanding? What do I understand that comes from just how I was raised, and how can I share that? And um, for me, it's so much about the research.
Yeah.
I'll just use this as an example, funerals. I've been to a lot of Chinese funerals in my life.
Mhm.
And one of the things at the end, you're given, actually, I have one right here, a little, some money that's
Mhm.
in paper.
Lysine.
And,
Is it
and
lysine?
well, this is because Lycee is more red, it's more
Red. Yeah.
celebratory. So you get a little bit of money and also candy. And so you can kind of just accept that. That's just a tradition.
Mhm.
But when I was writing, I can't remember which book, but Peony and Love, way back, that had a lot to do with the Chinese afterworld and death. And so, I was able to look at some of those traditions in a deeper way. So, the money is to remind you to go out and spend it. Life continues.
I
That's what
just read that. I just read that because she gets a gold coin and she says, I have to spend it to make sure life continues.
continues. And then the candy, of course, is to wash away the bitter taste of death.
Right.
So there are things that I think sometimes that we just accept because that's just how we were raised, but we don't really question why
Why?
we have those particular traditions.
Well, there's something I wanted to ask you. So I got to this point in the book. It's exactly page 218. I read it, and Lisa, I was blown away to the point that I went back 1.5 pages and slowly reread it again, which is I do with a lot of your books. And when I got to this point, I just read it, I breathed it, and I closed it because it was like raking in the journeys of Petal, Dove, and Moon and the characters you've written in your previous books all in one. It was so powerful that I
What
wanted
did
to.
I
Oh,
say?
I'd love to. So I just want to read the snippet to you, and then
Okay.
I want to understand, Lisa, where did this come from? So, and Auntie Fong runs her fingertips lightly over the bags. She says,
Oh,
each one holds the earth of a girl's home village. She turns to face me. What if, instead of leaving them here in darkness, you put the contents in your pots? It would be a spoonful here, a spoonful there, but you would be bringing our earth to your plants, and all these girls, and then Petal says, would have a chance to live again.
yeah. Yeah.
That is so powerful and so deep.
Yeah. So, it's funny how sometimes things come about. So, one of the things that many immigrants, Chinese immigrants, did back in the day was they'd bring a little satchel of soil from their home village and eat little grains of it, because that way they were having their home in them. I mean, not like a big handful of dirt, but just
Right.
like a little
Greens.
bit, maybe a little bit in tea, something like that. But it was just something that would give you comfort. And you've mentioned a part where It's discovered that several of these girls have died, and the woman who runs this house has kept their bags, and that Petal, who is growing things, and that this is another way. So to me, what's so interesting about writing is I knew I wanted to have those little satchels of dirt at the beginning. I wrote them in there. I did not know that there was going to come a point when Auntie Fong was going to open that cupboard and they would be there.
You're kidding. So this was organic because
Yeah.
I highlighted it because I fell in love with it, and I was like, there's a stronger meaning behind it. And as I continued reading, that soil which goes in the pots then transfers to an even bigger
Yeah,
meaning.
right. But I just feel sometimes, when you're writing that yes, you plot things out, I plot things out, but there are other things that happen that I think are magical,
Mhm.
and that you're sort of tuning into something much bigger. And this is one of them where and to me, I was so surprised. I was like, oh my God, I cannot believe what's in there. I cannot believe what Auntie Fong is saying. So
Exactly.
it wasn't something I planned. It was a gift. Let's just say that, a creative gift.
I mean, the gift of that scene that you wrote ties in and these are words that I just have been reading and feeling throughout your books, with whether it's Pinyin Love, whether it's Shanghai Girls, Dreams of Joy, and now, Daughters of the Sun and Moon, um, sacrifice, endurance, immigration, determination, courage, running toward danger versus running away, selflessness. These are women of substance that you're writing about, the best sentence that I could come up with is they're themes of sacrifice, suffering, and sisterhood through silent companionship.
Yes, that's beautiful. That's really beautiful. I you know, all of us are here
Mhm.
on Earth because there were women who came before us, who had strength, who were able to survive, sometimes really difficult circumstances. I mean, and they can be all kinds of things. It could be domestic abuse, it could be poverty, it could be what sends people from their home to seek a different life,
Mhm.
those kind of push and pull things for immigrants, what pushes someone out of a country, what pulls them to a new country.
Right.
And the courage that it takes, and the endurance, and the persistence, but also the faith in yourself that you're going to get through. And again, none of us would be here if there hadn't been women before us who had that. And that's what inspires me every day, is to think about those women. These three women, yes, they're based on real women, but we wouldn't call them extraordinary. They didn't invent.
Well, some of them are bound footed. They can't even move the way that we can walk and run. So they
Right.
have
So
mission.
they're truly ordinary women, and yet even within people's ordinariness is the capacity for extraordinary bravery, persistence, and endurance.
Which is where they're all the heroes of their own story,
Yeah.
all of them. And that you say this again, and I just read this today, trying not to read the book because I'm going to hit the end, but I read this and it says, people have kicked us, spit on us, thrown rocks at us, taunted us, and now tortured and killed some of us. To give up now, to cower before threats and brutality, would be to let the guilo triumph. And I know the word guilo.
Wow. Yeah.
We won't let that happen. That is so powerful
Yes. And, it pertains right now to today,
today.
right? I
You're
mean,
so
it's not just about 1870, it's right now today. And I think that's, I started the book 3 years ago. I didn't know what was going to be happening in the world when it came out,
true.
but I do feel that there are certain parallels that we can see, or attitudes about immigration, some certain kinds of violence that have been happening towards immigrants, over the last couple of years, that we can see those seeds from then that are still, we'll just say, sprouting today.
Right.
And
Wow.
I hope that, and I've been, getting nice letters from people, emails from people. And I've been really touched by what people are seeing in the story and how they're relating it to today. I mean, that was not my intention as I started writing it, because again, I didn't know what was going to be happening today.
Right. Right.
Started years ago, but people have been very thoughtful about that. And it's just interesting to me to see how readers are picking that up and everybody interprets a story their own way, of course. And some people might just read it and think, oh, it's about friendship, and call it a day, right?
Right.
But some people are looking at that history and relating it to things that are happening today.
Right. Well, Lisa, I have a million more questions, but we're out of time, and I just want to quickly ask you something, just to quickly share with our audience. Kumquats and canning, what is that about?
Oh, so I have a couple of kumquat trees that are prolific, and
Okay.
so I have come up with all kinds of things to do with kumquats, including kumquat marmalade and kumquat chutney, which is so good. I wish you could come over. I'd let you have some. It is like the best thing I've ever made.
Well, my son lives in LA, so maybe I'll get an opportunity to meet you and taste your kumquat chutney.
Wonderful.
And where can our viewers find you? Social media, website. Where's the best place for them to find you? And
Well, I have a website, lisac.com. I'm on Facebook, Instagram, TikTok, Threads, X. You can find me everywhere. I think the place actually that the two places would be my website, which has so much information that people can look at, if they want to look at photographs or maps or things that relate to particular books. I have a lot of the research there, but also on Facebook. I think just because there's a little more literal space there that I can share more sometimes about the history behind the book or things like that, where there's just, more than this many characters that you can use.
Well, thank you, Lisa. It has been a true honor to be able to talk to you, to understand what you have to say outside of the pages, the phenomenal work you do. And I know our viewers are going to love every word you have said, and they're going to rush out and buy your book. So thank you for being with us today. And for all of you who have joined us, thank you for your time, sharing your, screen with us. And you can find me at anjugattani.com, the Winds of Fire series, and of course, the host of Story Mantra, where I live and breathe books. Thank you.